My belief is that every single human being on the planet is a unique creative genius with a passion and a purpose that they came here to share. And my job becomes helping them recognize that and realize that, and helping all of us to recognize the unique creative genius, not only in ourselves, but in everyone else. I have done a lot of work with kids with special needs and adults with special needs. And in working with them, I have realized that Einstein's quote that's attributed to him, that everyone is a genius, but if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life believing it's stupid. That is the quote that is the first metaphor that I apply to the metaphorical metaphysical guide. If we don't recognize how we are brilliant, then we can't really share that with others.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am again your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I am joined by Sandra Cavanaugh. Sandra, how are you today?
I am great. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. So Sandra has spent much of her career teaching and coaching thousands of successful entrepreneurs, business leaders and their teams, creative artists, actors, writers, parents, students, and educators on a whole wide variety of interesting stuff. Her international best-selling book, Spontaneous Brilliance, illuminates the meta-meaning of Shakespeare's assertion, all the world stage, with her playful and powerful metaphorical, metaphysical guide to sharing your unique creative genius in an improv on the great stage of life. How'd I do?
Pretty darn good.
Good. I have no idea what I just said. No, I'm just kidding. I do know what I just said. But I do find the entire thing very interesting because I think the main gist of what you do is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of talking to people and helping them discover this creative genius or this creative side that they might not even know they have. And if they do have it, helping them fulfill it. Would that be an accurate depiction, at least of partially what you do?
Partially, yeah. What was interesting about what you said is you said, if they have it. And my belief is that every single human being on the planet is a unique creative genius with a passion and a purpose that they came here to share. And my job becomes helping them recognize that and realize that, and helping all of us to recognize the unique creative genius, not only in ourselves, but in everyone else. Like literally accepting that everyone is brilliant in some way, in their way. And so the task then becomes for all of us to notice that in one another and respect it and honor it in one another before we even, quote, see it, before we can recognize exactly what it is. And I came to this belief because for years, not only have I been teaching professional actors and coaching people in all different kinds of fields, but I have done a lot of work with kids with special needs and adults with special needs. And in working with them, I have realized that Einstein's quote that's attributed to him, that everyone is a genius, but if you ask a fish to climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life believing it's stupid. And that is the quote that is the first metaphor that I apply to the metaphorical metaphysical guide, is just basically that, some of us are just not monkeys. We're not born to climb that tree, and we're fish or giraffes or pangolins or whatever. And so if we don't recognize how we are brilliant, then we can't really share that with others. We can't really manage to get it out there. And most people, I find, feel like they either live, learn, or work, or maybe all three, in an environment that doesn't recognize their genius, doesn't allow them to feel seen, heard, understood.
So how does someone, and hell, we could pick on me for a second. How does someone like me, who's, been a professional for 30 something years, in basically the same line of work, maybe there's something in me that I don't even know is in me, kind of thing. Or maybe this is, I know I'm a little off topic from what you're saying, but is this where I'm supposed to be? Is this where my genius is best utilized? Is this where I'm maximizing my potential or whatever it may be? How do I, in essence, self-assess to realize how can I be the best me?
Well, part of the self-assessment is to acknowledge, to be very honest with ourselves about the things that we desire in life, the wants and desires and dreams that we have, and to acknowledge that those are a guide, if you will, or inspiration from inside us that is telling us, where we can lean, where we can move into in our lives. And most of us ignore that, or we push it down, or we think it's for later, or we think, when I retire, that's when I'll do the thing I really love, rather than looking at how the thing that you really love maybe is the driver for how your life could be successful and prosperous, etc. But also, it's getting out of the practice of ignoring those spontaneous ideas and spontaneous thoughts that come to us. It's not so much identifying, oh, my life is on the wrong track, and so I've been doing the wrong thing for 30 years. It's looking at how can I notice those spontaneous thoughts that come to me and apply them to this thing that I have been loving doing for 30 years. What am I not saying? What am I not pursuing? What am I not offering? So it's not really about, wondering if this brilliance is going to show up in some gigantic way. It's noticing that each and every one of us thinks faster than we can even perceive. And we don't notice most of those thoughts. A lot of times I'll walk in front of a corporate audience and I'll say, everybody raise your hand if you've ever had to stop and think. And everybody will raise their hand. And then when all the hands are in the air, I go, no, you didn't. You don't have to stop and think. We think faster than we can perceive. We think a minimum of 60,000 thoughts a day. Right. And those are including thoughts like I need to scratch my nose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if we're thinking 60,000 thoughts
now I
a
have
day,
to scratch my nose. See, you should have said that. Now suddenly I have an answer.
If we're thinking 60,000 thoughts a day, then what are the odds that at least one of those thoughts is absolutely stunningly brilliant and we're ignoring it because we're on the way to work or we didn't write it down and then we forgot or whatever it is. And so what I teach people to do, one of the things I teach people to do is to acknowledge and notice those spontaneous thoughts. And then I also apply my first favorite metaphor, which you mentioned, which is Shakespeare's line that all the world's a stage. And I was teaching actors for probably 30 years before I noticed what I was saying to them every day. I was saying to actors that I was directing or that I was teaching all the time, I'd say, in acting as in life, this thing is true. Or in improvisation as in life, this thing is true. And then one day I went, oh, hey, maybe I should listen to myself and notice that that everything that works for an effective performance on the stage works when it's applied to what I call the great stage of life, because life is a 24/7 improvisation by definition. And in improvisation, there are only three things that you are ever doing. Improvisation is very, very, very simple. It's simply that you are doing one of three things. You are either making an offer, you are accepting an offer, or you are blocking an offer. And the key to a successful improvisation is to offer, to accept, and not to block. And so what I teach people to do is to notice that in life, since life is a 24/7 improv, then there are only three things you can ever be doing. You can only be offering, accepting, or blocking. And again, we need to make offers. Most of us don't make offers. Most of us over-accept the offers of other people. If we are listening to, say, our boss tell us, things need to be done exactly this way, and we think, gosh, I really, really, really should mention that I think we could be more efficient over here, and we don't mention it, we're not making an offer. We're accepting their offer, and then we're blocking our offer. We're just not even saying it. And most of us started out learning to do that in school, you know, when the teacher would ask a question and we'd be in grade school and we'd know we knew the answer, but we were afraid to raise our hand because we might be, you know, thought weird or we didn't want to draw attention. We've been practicing it for most of our lives, not offering the thought that came to us.
Well, I imagine the big driver to that is fear, whether it's fear of rejection, fear of embarrassment, fear of being wrong. You know, at the end of the day, you know, if you want to go on, if you want to date, well, based upon your example of, you know, improv, I have to ask you out. If I decide I'm not going to ask you out, I'm blocking you. Why am I not asking you out? Well, assuming I'm interested, I'm not asking you out because I don't want to be rejected. And then that comes with the fear of rejection. So my question is obviously, how do you not let fear control you in these situations? And how do you push past that?
Well, that's a great question. And there's a semi-long answer to it, but I will try to be brief in that. It's practicing offering. It's practicing offering, and it's recognizing that my mentor in the theater was Olympia Dukakis. She got the Academy Award for Moonstruck, and Ollie used to say, "Fear is boring." She would say, "Fear is boring," all the time, and I've altered that a little bit to say fear makes us boring. You know, fear makes us not offer, right? So when we notice that we are not offering out of fear, and you said, why am I not offering? There is a chapter in Spontaneous Brilliance where I speak about the fact that there is no why. You know, there is no actual why. Why is a justification. Why is us asking, how do I justify this? How do I quantify this? How do I excuse this? How do I explain this? What we need to look at instead of why is what. What do I want more than I want to ask this person out? What is it that I could do that would make me comfortable? Or what is it that I'm seeing in myself that I'm afraid they might be not liking? Or what is the thing that could happen? And then bring those into practical terms. What is the worst that could happen? Well, they'll say no. Okay, well, I'm guaranteeing they say no if I don't ask them. So what have I got to lose? And usually the answer to what have I got to lose is I've got to lose that I'm going to experience feeling fear. That I'm going to experience feeling bad. That's the thing that's possibly going to happen. And the thing is, that's our egoic self. That's our protective, what I got this from Dr. Sue Morter originally. She calls the egoic self the protective personality. And its job is to protect us. It's a little overactive in most of us because it's trying to protect us from things that haven't happened and are probably not going to happen most of the time. And they're emotion-based, usually. You know, granted, the protective personality, we do have certain things that protect us from, you know, stepping in front of the bear. But there is no bear there when you're asking somebody out on a date, right? There's just the fear that I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to have my perspective of myself lessened. And so that leads us to part of how we deal with that fear in the protective personalities, that we get to know ourselves really, really well. And we have to look at ourselves like looking at ourselves like a character on the stage. If we're going to play a character on the stage, we explore everything that character is about. We know them upside down and backwards. Most of us don't explore ourselves as deeply as an actor does to play a character on the stage. But we are playing this character. You know, we are incarnate here on this planet as this character. And So there are other things besides the improvisational truisms of offering, accepting, and not blocking. Things like the acting truism that what you've got to do when you're playing a character is find the love. You've got to find the thing that that character loves. And most people, even when they're acting out of fear, they are acting out of love. They are trying to protect that thing that they love. And so if we can identify what does the character love and what does the character love more, then we can point ourselves in the direction of making choices that will help to reinforce that thing that we love the most.
Interesting. Yeah, you talk to people in a lot of industries and you keep referring to, actors and actresses, and I've had a few of them on the podcast, and one of them said the biggest challenge they had, not necessarily when they are acting, but before they got successful, is they had to get over fear, because more times than not in that industry and other industries, it's the norm is the rejection.
Yeah.
The not norm is the acceptance. So again, back to your point about offering, if you're going to fear rejection in an occupation, that rejection is going to come a lot more than it's not going to come. You're never going to have a chance to, as you put it, maybe find that inner genius in you or find that talent in you because you're afraid to take that first step.
And that is why, when you're working with an actor that is afraid, like they're saying, oh, did I do that right? Is my foot in the right place? Is my, and did my voice sound right? And they're thinking about all the wrong things. They're not playing the scene. They're worried about where their hand position is, and they're all tightened up about the wrong things. The first thing that I do is point out to them another acting truism, which is acting is about making the other guy look good. If you get your focus off yourself, you get your focus off the fear of what you are or are not doing, because you're actually there in a very generous mode trying to help the other person be successful. So if you can reshift when you're in those points of fear where you're not saying what you're thinking or you're not offering, that you shift your attention to helping the other person, to being there to support the other person or persons or community or corporation or whatever it is. If your your offer is in support of their performance being successful, then you get your attention off yourself, and then the egoic self, the protective personality, can kind of get short-circuited because we can be focused on the other person or the other people.
It's an interesting concept because it's definitely something, people struggle with. And I think it's a combination of the fear factor, like I just said. I also think comes down to self-confidence. And that might go back to your point about discovering what you have in you that you might not realize you have. And until you realize your full potential, or as you put, your full genius, maybe your self-confidence is going to be limited as well.
Absolutely. Of course it's going to be. And that's why, with novice actors, we just take them to, or people in corporations that aren't interacting with each other, because as a creativity and communication specialist, I go into lots of circumstances where people just aren't talking and listening to one another. And they're not sharing, they're not getting used to offering. And so we simply say in every circumstance, if you treat every circumstance like it's a fact. It is just a fact. This person's screaming at me today because I dropped this thing on the floor in my office or whatever. It's a fact that they're yelling at me, right? So how can I yes and that, right? Yes and is a game that's now become popularized in all kinds of business circumstances. And Viola Spolin was the improv teacher that came up with it many years ago. And yes and is just a game that you play when you're teaching somebody to improvise, that no matter what the other person says, you say yes. So you accept it. You make it a fact in the improv. And then you add your offer, which is the and, which builds upon it. So no matter what that person is doing, if someone is angry with you or if someone is rejecting you, then how do you yes and that? You simply say, I hear it, I see it, right? And this is my offer in response to it. You don't shut down and run away. You don't block it by just screaming back at them
Right.
or pretending that they didn't yell at you or whatever, or pretending they didn't say no. And you also recognize that everything that on the stage, an offer is anything that you say or do. In life, it's anything that you think, say, or do. So all of the thoughts that you have are also offers you're making to yourself, right? And even if you don't like the offer, like the thought is a thought of fear, you can yes and that thought. You don't ignore it. You say, okay, I hear you, my little tape playing in my head that plays all the time. I get it. And that is not the way I'm choosing to continue to think about this. I'm going to actively offer myself a different thought, a different choice. It's about choosing. Stella Adler said your talent lies within your choice, as when she's talking to actors, and I say your success lies within your choices. What you choose.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I mean, everything in life is a choice. I mean everything. And you said you have about how many thoughts a day. I would say to you, how many choices do you have a day? Because everything you do is a choice. I mean,
Absolutely.
everything. Do I hit the snooze button? Do I eat breakfast at home or do I get something when I get to work? I mean, and in between those two things, there were probably 20 more. Do I walk the dog a second time before I leave for work? Should I put the wash in the dryer before I leave for work? Everything you do, getting dressed. What I wear these shoes with these socks. I mean, so how your day is going to go for anyone is going to be really driven on the choices they make. And I do believe that some things are just random, both good and bad. But I do believe the way your day goes is primarily based on how you choose to make your decisions all day.
Exactly. Everybody has 100% responsibility for everything in their lives. And usually when I say that,
Books, when we were kids, it was like those choose your own adventure books.
uh-huh.
And I haven't seen them recently, but for those listening, it was basically you read a chapter, and then basically when you got to the end of the chapter, you're at a door. I'm making this up, or you see a dragon, whatever it may be, and it's like, all right, you're going to run or you're going to slay the dragon. And if you say you want to run, it's going to say go to page 46. If you say you want to go and fight the dragon, it's turn to page 53, and your adventure continues based upon the choices. And I remember in some of those books, eventually, your character was killed because, in essence, you made the quote unquote wrong choices. And obviously, no choice is ever wrong. It's what you decided to choose. But then your adventure kept going if you chose the way to kind of keep fighting the evil empire or whatever it may be. But I think that's a good symbolic replication of life because every choice we make feeds on the next choice in that day, either directly or indirectly.
Exactly. And it's an absolutely perfect example or parallel to life. Like that's why people play D&D now and all these role playing opportunities. They're exactly the same thing. And they are our little, they're sort of a microcosm for what we're doing on the grade stage of life, if you will. Everybody, as I said a moment ago, everybody has 100% responsibility for everything in their lives. And when I say that to people, sometimes they will like balk. They're like, I'm not to blame for this thing that's happening in my life. And responsibility has nothing to do with fault or blame. We almost can put a hyphen in the middle of the word, responsibility. It's based, everything becomes whatever it becomes in your life based on how you respond to it.
Right. Yes. And there are obviously exceptions that we can all think of. But for the most part, how you respond is your choice on how you're going to respond to it.
Well, but even if something is really, really horrid, it's absolutely horrid and people treat you absolutely horridly, there is that Viktor Frankl kind of response. Viktor Frankl was the psychologist that wrote about his experience during the Holocaust, and that the way that you respond on the inner, the way that you view this and the way that you experience it and grow from it, that dictates what it becomes in your life, as opposed to being victimized or overrun by it. If you get fired from a job, that can become an opportunity. It is an opportunity for something, even if part of it is a financial struggle or a shock to your system in a bunch of ways. It's still, there is something else beyond that. And the way that you respond to it, if you curl up in a ball and stay in the corner, that's one way to respond to it. And it's your offer is a big giant block, right? But if your offers become pursuing what you love and figuring out how to find the love in this situation, what is the thing that this is offering to you? What is the possibility here? Then you can turn it into something. Too often we let ourselves decide that the choices are out of our control. Well, the choice of how we respond, how we view it, and how we experience it, and what we offer is never out of our control.
Interesting. So yeah, so it's all. I think what you're getting at in a different way is, we kind of control our mindset, and it goes back to some of the key words we use: finding your creativity, self-confidence, overcoming fear, and at the end of the day, I know you talk about recognizing in others their genius and things like that. I think maybe not before, but in addition to you recognizing that in others, I think what's more important is recognizing it in yourself.
Absolutely. What is it that makes us embarrassed? Like if I say to a crowd, when's the last time you woke up and looked in the mirror and said, hey, you unique creative genius, glad to see you today.
I actually used those exact words this morning when I woke up. So it's funny you mentioned that.
Beautiful. But most people,
okay, maybe not. Okay.
Most people laugh and then I'm like, why are we laughing at that? Why can't we do that? Why don't we do that? Why don't we look in the mirror and go, you are absolutely amazing and I'm so excited to spend this day with you?
Wasn't that a Saturday Night? I forget if it was Saturday Night Live skit, and I forget it was where the person keeps looking and says, and you're special, you're nice, and gosh darn it, people like you. And I forget where it's from, but it's kind of like giving yourself a pep talk, before you kind of go through it, or you've seen it in documentaries before a musician goes out on stage. You see them in the corner just talking to themselves. They're here to see you. People are going to love you. You're going to put on a great show. And they're saying but they're talking to themselves. It's not even I'm going to put on a great show. They're talking as if there's someone else talking to them. You're going to be great. You're going to a great show. You're going to have the energy to get through it. You're going to, and you hear with athletes too. You're going to, and I think that's also why, kind of to your point, what you do, I think coaching, is so important. Not necessarily coaching of the skill that you are possessing, meaning an athletic skill, a musical skill, but the skills of the mindset and the skills of the beliefs and all that kind of stuff.
And those things, those limiting beliefs, we got them from other people. We got them from outside of us. We were not born with limiting beliefs. If you look at any infant, that's hungry or that doesn't like what's happening to it, they are not shy about telling you at the top of their lungs, right? They're just offering whatever. We have to learn to stop offering ourselves. We have to learn. We learn by learning comparison, by learning competition, by learning compromise, by learning all of these ways that we short circuit ourselves. And we get those from outside of us. And so when you're looking at, why we don't tell ourselves we're brilliant is because somewhere along the line we learned that that's a negative, or that's, the egoic self, the protective personality gets a bad rap. Like having an ego that's healthy is a bad thing,
Right.
We've somehow.
I agree with that to an extent. I think there's a perception, and again, perception's a reality. And as I always say, if I, at least to me anyway, if I perceive something one way, whether it's true or not, it's my reality anyway. I think confidence and ego can come across sometimes as overconfident or this guy's, he's full of himself kind of thing. So you can call it society, you can call it whatever you want. People who come across as an egomaniac or overly confident oftentimes can rub other people the wrong way. So if you're turned off by someone who possesses that, I can see why you don't want to be that way. Now, having said that, if I'm a very confident person, I can also be confident in a way that isn't something that's going to turn you off. But there
Absolutely.
are many people who are confident, ego, and maybe for good reason, who are not afraid to tell people that they're confident or not afraid to show it in ways that, let's face it, are, as most people perceive, to be a very negative view.
But if that is true, if the way that they're behaving is they're aggressively, if they're aggressively confident, if you will, then they are not finding the love. They are not working to make the other guy look good. They are blocking. They are using their offers they're just offering. They're over offering. They're not accepting. They're not listening. They are not doing any of the things. And so yes, we're afraid of being that person, but the only people that are afraid of being that person are people who aren't going to be that person, right? Because they notice what that's like. So if we are employing all of the things together, there's an interesting improvisation technique that was taught by Keith Johnstone, which is about status interactions. And I love status interactions, and I used to teach these to attorneys until I realized that I was maybe teaching people to manipulate other people, because status interactions are something that we do naturally in life, right? We have high status or low status or somewhere in between, right? And when we are interacting with another person, we can only do one of four things. We can raise or lower our own status, or we can raise or lower the other person's status. Those can be what our offers are intended to do. And when we get stuck in needing to feel high status, because again, we're acting out of fear. So I need to feel high status. So I try to create an artificial high status, or by basically trying to lower the status of the people around me, then that's when I'm going to be perceived as aggressively overconfident or like an egomaniac or whatever, because I'm not noticing that my job too is to help that other person feel calm in their status. If I need somebody to be below me, if I'm acting from a place of competition or comparison, if in order to feel good, I need somebody else to feel less than, then if I can't check myself, then that's when we need to notice those people in society and move away from that, right? But in myself, when I'm noticing the genius in myself, my job is to say, again, what is it that I'm trying to get out of behaving like this, right? What is it that I'm doing? I don't want to tell myself a why, because I can always say, well, it's because so-and-so did this to me, so I'm going to do this back, right? If there's a why, we're trying to justify our behavior. If there's a what, it's like, what am I really wanting out of this? And then how can I yes and this circumstance to get there? How can I notice what I'm actually really doing? Where is the fear in me? And where is the love in me? And can I put the love in the front of the fear?
I think the parent, and I would say that's probably the struggle that 85 or 90% of the world probably deal with.
Or
Maybe
100% if they're conscious.
yeah. 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 Except for those few really confident, whatever. But right. And even so with them, their love is first, but it's just basically love for themselves. So it's a different kind of love.
And they probably aren't thinking in terms of love. They're not checking themselves, because everything is out of fear. A person who is aggressively self-confident, if you will, and is they are constantly comparing themselves to someone else. And I talk about these as the bad C words, comparison, competition, compromise, which is kind of just agreed mutual blocking. It's like we have to stop the comparison, stop the competition, and just be in collaboration and cooperation, because nature is truly cooperative.
Yes. It really is interesting stuff. So your book, Spontaneous Brilliance, can that be found on people who want to get the book? Where can they get the book?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere that you get books. The audiobook is available, Kindle, the paperback, they're all available everywhere.
Okay, and on social media?
On social media, Spontaneous Brilliance and sandracavanaugh.com, spontaneousbrilliance.com. And the podcast happens weekly. Every Friday, there's a new Spontaneous Brilliance podcast, and that's available wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Very interesting stuff. And I wish you nothing but success and the growing of your creative genius.
Thank you, Mike, and the same to you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.